The average person in the UK will spend just 61.5 years in good health. That's according to the latest data from the Office of National Statistics. And if you're planning to retire at 67, well, do the maths. My name's George Agan. I'm a chartered financial planner and a fellow of the Personal Finance Society. I've helped thousands of UK retirees navigate their finances without worry. And today I'm going to share 3 stats that have genuinely changed how I and some of my clients think about retirement. These are stats backed from UK data from things like the ONS, the Institute of Physical Studies, and the PLSA. By the end of this video, you'll know whether you're working longer than you need to, or whether you need to take your planning more seriously. Either way, I hope these numbers change the way you think about something. And to be honest, the third statistic, it's the one that shocked me when I first saw the research, and will fundamentally change how you might be considering spending in retirement. But I'll come back to that. So the first one we're going to be talking about is what's called the healthy years gap. So let me ask you something. When you picture your retirement, what do you see? Perhaps you're traveling with your partner, walking a coastal path, playing with the grandkids. Maybe it's finally finishing that restoration project in your home or in the garage. Whatever it is, I bet it involves being active, being physically mobile, well, being healthy. And this is where a lot of retirement planning goes wrong. Because what we do is we plan for life expectancy based on averages, but we should really be planning for healthy life expectancy based on what's realistic to us. So according to ONS data from December 2024, UK life expectancy is 83 years for a female and 79.1 for a male. The averages actually do change depending on the age we're looking at here, so I've used a broad assumption. It doesn't matter too much for the point I'm making here. Healthy life expectancy, this is the key thing. These are the years which are called in good health or very good health. This is self-identified and we can pull hairs on whether that's the right way to do it. In my view, it doesn't matter. If you're someone who's like, I feel in bad health, then that it can be something you can describe yourself of. Clearly, it's your experience, which is the most important. Anyway, for this, it is just 61.5 years for males and 61.9 for females. So think about that. If you retire at state pension age, you've potentially already used up your healthy years. You know, the ONS data is clear. We're not living longer in good health. We're living longer in declining health. We're being kept alive for longer. A financial planner I deeply respect called Dan Haler, he puts it brilliantly. We're not living longer, we're dying slower. And here's where it gets even more sobering. When we have a look at the regional data, the gap varies enormously by where you live. In Glasgow, male life expectancy is just 74.3 years, the lowest in the UK, and healthy life expectancy, 54.8 years. Meanwhile, in Hart, in Hampshire, men can expect to live 83.7 years. That's nearly a decade more than Glasgow. In Kensington and Chelsea, women can expect to live 87.1 years. And the deprivation gap in places like Scotland is even more stark. According to the Scottish Public Health Observatory, males in the most deprived 10% of Scotland have a life expectancy of just 69.1 years. The healthy life expectancy, just 47.4 years for women in the most deprived areas. I kind of saw this tale firsthand. My dad was from a mining town in the northeast. He was my absolute hero, but like many of his generation, he didn't really look after himself. Certainly not in the way we understand now. You know, when I was 5, we'd visit my granny and they'd give us pop, which in hindsight was basically like 12 spoonfuls of sugar in each drink, and it was kind of love expressed through treats. Anyway, a stone and being overweight later when I was a child. It doesn't take away from any of the point, which is that healthy life expectancy isn't a statistic. It's about real families and real retirement choices. So what can you actually do with this information? Well, I think you should stop anchoring your retirement plans to an age on your pension statement just because it says so. Instead, I'd really encourage you to find out when is the earliest point work becomes optional for you. Don't get me wrong, I've seen too many people retire too early with no purpose, and that's hugely risky too. They'll, have things invest in the market and then panic when the market takes an inevitable dip, or sometimes try and do too many expensive things all at once. But I think for the people watching this, you are clearly motivated because you're here educating yourself on retirement topics, and you're probably in a much better position than you realize. Let's not lose sight of the purpose of money. Money is a tool to make your life the best it can be. Make sure your money is in service to you, not the other way around. Okay, statistic 2 is the comparison trap. Let's just talk about the head trash we all carry around. You know what I mean? You look at your neighbours and think, well, they're still working, they've got a bigger house than us, so there's no way that I could retire. Or they seem to spend loads on holidays, and I reckon I've got less money than them. So I think early retirement is impossible if they're still working. Come on, that is all noise. There can be huge differences between what's in the bank and what you see. And I know this myself as a wealth planner. There's a big difference between visual wealth and actual wealth. You have no idea if they want to spend far less in retirement or if they will ever retire. There is some data which might change your perspective here. From the ONS, when they had a look at wealth in Great Britain from 2020-2022, this was published in Jan 2025, so it's the most recent we have. Anyway, average pension wealth for people from 55 to 74 was approximately 140,000. There's other research here from the likes of PensionBee, which actually state that being much lower. They say that from 40 to 49 it's about 23,000, and from 50 it's 42,000. It's important to bear in mind that the average pension wealth is the best way to look at it, because pension pots can be lots of little pots, which drives down the average. And if we add some context, the PLSA, the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, publishes the retirement living standards. And I've criticised these previously because it's not perfect, but they are a good stake in the ground as far as what some retirement lifestyles cost. Basically, it's minimum for a single person of 13,400, 21,600 for a couple. Moderate, more security is 31,300 for a single person, 43,100 for a couple. And then comfortable, which is a bit more extras and some flexibility, 43,900 for a single person and 60,600 for a couple. But if there are two people in a household, both are receiving a full state pension, well then that's the best part of £24,000. So they will already meet a minimum standard without any private pensions once they reach state pension age. But if you're watching this channel, you're probably aiming higher than the minimum, and that's absolutely fine. The point is to know what you need, not what averages say, not what your neighbour needs. Some of my wealthiest clients live very modest lifestyles. And actually, let me grab something. This is a really good book. I'd recommend everyone reads it. It's Morgan Housel, and it's called The Art of Spending Money. I gave this to a client recently because they weren't spending enough. Anyway, he said it's a brilliant observation, is this, which is the greatest asset on your balance sheet is not needing to impress other people. He argues through this that mental and emotional independence is a true form of wealth. I completely agree. You know, it's about freeing yourself up from societal pressures and the endless rat race. So at this point, as we get to retirement, why would we ever make retirement decisions based on comparison averages? Surely, if there is ever a time to let go of comparisons, it's in retirement. The time where you reflect and you take stock of the wisdom and experience you've accumulated. You deserve better than trying to plan for your neighbour's retirement. And this is where it leads me on to the third stat, which is I'm going to call the wealth surplus paradox. And this one's an interesting one, and this kind of shocked me quite a bit when I read the research. So according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, that's with an F, by the way, because I rushed and mispronounced that and got absolutely murdered in the comments not too long ago. Anyway, they say that most wealth held by current retirees will be bequeathed on their death rather than being spent during their lifetime, and that a lot of retired people look to set to bequeath or leave most of their wealth. The majority of homeowners don't move or access their housing wealth. Even financial wealth is drawn down, but slowly. And another striking finding from this is most people don't experience large end-of-life expenses that would use up all their wealth. Among those who died between 2002 and 2012, only 7% received help with daily activities from privately paid employees 2 years before their death. That's only 7% stayed in nursing home for 6 months or more. So care can have a massive impact, and I don't want to underplay it, but it's not quite the bogeyman that I think a lot of people think it is. I'm not undermining it, I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily affect as many people as the headlines might make you think. But there's something at the heart of this that I deal with daily as a planner. The very habits that make you financially successful, the prudence, the discipline, the careful saving, they are incredibly difficult to untangle when you come to retirement. It's not just a switch. We're all creatures of habit. If you spent 30 years getting to financial freedom, watching those numbers rise, it can be quite distressing to watch them go down, even if it's part of a plan, even when that's the entire point of having the money, what you sacrificed for. This isn't just a UK problem. Research from the Alliance of Lifetime Income in the US found that retirees spend roughly 80% of their guaranteed income, things like their version of the state pension, but less than half what they could safely spend from their other savings and investments. They actually found that 65-year-old couples were spending just 2% of their savings, half of the more commonly cited 4% rule everyone talks about. And And let me tell you a story about a client I've worked with, and we had a discussion last year on this, and they'd been working non-stop for decades, no real breaks. They came to me originally wanting to just spend time with the family, with their spouse, help elderly parents, and actually finally pursue some hobbies that they've been putting off for years, because it's not that easy to do hobbies when you're working 5 days a week and you've got a family. Anyway, we did all the planning, and the truth is they were in an amazing position. They could clearly retire. In fact, they could have retired a few years earlier. But then a compelling career opportunity came up. Great people, interesting work. So it was a real take stock moment. And I remember saying in the meeting, of course, if your goals have changed, take the role. But remember that you came to me saying that you'd worked non-stop for decades and that you wanted to retire, and the reasons that you gave for doing that, the family support and all the rest of it. Are you sure that that has changed? We can, of course, change the plan, but you can't get your time back. Anyway, the result of that was they then took some time, considered it, discussed it as a family, and they actually did decide to pack it in, to spend some time with the family, to take back some of their own time. I personally see that as an amazing result, and I was really thrilled to be part of the decision because I think it's going to serve them far better than another year of salary ever could. Life isn't a rehearsal at the end of the day, and you don't want someday becoming if only. But some of you might be saying, well, what about leaving stuff for the kids? And if your goal is to leave as much as possible to the kids, fair enough. But for most people, I want the kids to be okay, but I actually want them to make their own way. I love to help them with a house deposit, but if they're already getting our home when we pass away, they don't need an extra 800,000 on top. I've seen a lot of kids who inherit money from their parents who work themselves into poor health, and the kids themselves would gladly trade the inheritance for more healthy years with mum and dad. You could argue that the kids sometimes don't need to see that life is all about working until you drop. They need to see what a life with options looks like. That is, however, deeply personal, and I'm just giving you some things to think about, not necessarily saying it's right for you. Okay, so what can you actually do with this information? Well, first, get clarity on your numbers, not newspaper numbers, not what your neighbour might need, your actual numbers. I have criticised the PLC standards as I think they are inaccurate in many ways, but they are a starting point. The best way to do it is to map your own circumstances, get your expenditure, understand what you need. The second is understand retirement isn't binary. Maybe you can stop work completely tomorrow, but you could go part-time. You could shift to something less stressful, lower paid, take longer holidays, pick whatever you wish. Retirement can be as flexible as your life has been. And third, factor in the value of your time. If work gives you purpose, amazing. Take it and enjoy it. If it doesn't, every year you delay retirement is a year you don't get back. So you need to think about what it's worth to you. And four, just try and understand the key planning fact, your essential expenses, your lifestyle expenses, how inflation is going to affect your purchasing power. Think about healthcare costs as you age. Don't just discount them entirely. What happens if one of you needs care? How can you reduce the tax burden in retirement? If you are thinking about, right, how close am I to being retirement ready? We've done a brilliant assessment that you can do. It's completely without charge, and it'll give you a really good idea of how prepared you are for retirement. So there you have it, 3 stats that might change the way you think about retirement, that you need to understand the difference between life expectancy and a healthy life expectancy. The average pension pot is much smaller than most people think, and comparisons get you nowhere. It's got to be right for you. And 3, just be cognizant of the fact that the habits that built your wealth are going to maybe make it hard to spend it. So awareness is the best way to tackle this. These stats are not intended to scare you into bad decisions. They're meant to help you make more thoughtful decisions based on reality rather than fear and assumptions. Time is the only thing you can't get more of. So let's make sure you're not wasting it unnecessarily. But if you found that useful and you'd like to know how much your average pension pot can give you, I did a really good video on a £750,000 pension pot, and this will give you an idea of how much you could potentially spend in retirement. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching the channel. See you next time.